Recording now, so let's start with a blessing. Baruch
Sher Kitchanu, Torah.
So, Terry, thank you very much for inviting your cousin last week. That was super fun to have a guest. And
what did he think?
You know what? I talked to him right afterward, and he was fine. He enjoyed it, but he was on his way to get on his bike and go somewhere. So we haven't talked deeply about it, but I think it was I think it was nice for him.
Good. Well, he's welcome anytime. So we are back with our regularly scheduled program. We're in Leviticus chapter 26, verse 20. And we're in the midst of this section of whatever it is, 40 verses of curses. That's funny, I'm thinking I do the midah of the day every day. I should do the curse of the day. or trade some good Yiddish curses. Anybody know good Yiddish curse? All of your teeth should fall out except one, so you can still have a toothache.
That's pretty nasty. Yeah, that's
I have never heard that one.
Did you find that one on Google? No.
No, that's just the one that I know. You should go like an onion with your head in the ground.
We once had a book of Yiddish curses, but I loaned it to someone and never got it back. But I guess if you want it badly enough, or someone wants badly enough, they could probably find it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I don't know if you remember the sermon I gave quite a few years ago on Yiddish words that you should know and use. It was
I remember.
It was a second day Rosh Hashanah.
Yes.
Sermon, as I recall. I can find it and send you the link if you haven't seen it. But,
that would be good.
Yeah. Okay. Let me make a note.
We could all use a good curse at this point.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't
It
been cursed enough.
We're kind of living.
Yeah, it was Yiddish phrases. I think what had happened was I was at the Nosh one time and somebody was telling me about having just come back from a wedding, and I said to them, "Af simchas," and they looked at me. They had no idea what I was talking about. I realized that even though I don't speak Yiddish, my parents don't speak Yiddish. I don't know if my grandparents even spoke Yiddish, but we all lived and grew up in Brooklyn, where there was a certain amount of Yiddish milieu in the air that I just absorbed a certain working vocabulary just from being in that environment that I realized our constituency is not aware of. So that inspired me to put together this sermon for Rosh Hashanah, and I think I even gave out a vocabulary list with it so people could.
I think that would be great. I had a guy who worked for me for years and years from Ohio, straight-laced Irish Catholic, but he lived in New York for 25 years.
There you go.
That Yiddish words were as much part of his vocabulary as anything else. So I think it would be wonderful.
That's wonderful.
You don't have to live in New York because it's part of our everyday English. Language.
You're right, Sarah.
There's so many words in there. If you do a crossword puzzle, there's always some Yiddish clue in there.
Really? Yeah. Oh, I love when the newscasters introduce somebody as a maven.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah.
I never thought about that.
So the old joke. The guy walks into the Chinese restaurant and the waiter is addressing him in Yiddish, and as the customer is leaving, he says to the proprietor, "Thank you so much. That was a wonderful meal, and what a great gimmick, a Chinese waiter who speaks Yiddish." And the proprietor says, "Shush, he thinks we're teaching him English."
Okay.
So curses. We're in verse 20. So that your strength shall be spent to no purpose, or a translation in vain, Reek in reek is it's like vanity, like we have in Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanities, for naught. Your land shall not yield its produce, nor shall the trees of the land yield their fruit. So we had already the verse that preceded it was your skies like iron and your earth like copper. So we're in an agricultural environment here. No rain, no ability to plant and sow and reap. So you won't have any food to eat. What could be worse? That's the fundamental need, second only to water, is food. But if we extricate that phrase in the middle, so that your strength shall be spent to no purpose, we can look at that, I think, even outside of the agricultural context. And what's more frustrating than trying to get something done and working hard at it and not being able to accomplish the goal?
Yeah.
So whether it's in agriculture or whether it's in another environment, just the tremendous frustration element, aside from the starvation element, the frustration element of your strength shall be spent in vain. Terry, yes.
Yeah, the commentary describes the lead and the earth like copper, hard and unproductive. And it says one of the curses in the treatise of
Esarhaddon, yes.
May all the gods turn your soil into iron so that no one may cut a furrow in it. Just as rain does not fall from a copper sky, so may there come neither rain nor dew upon your fields. And that's from Deuteronomy.
Right. So a common image in ancient Near Eastern culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about reading on. I mean, right where you left off is where it gets hysterical to me, because it reminds me of the joke you told about leaving a tooth to get a pain in. It's a little backwards, but see if you agree with me after you read the next sentence.
Okay. Oh, good morning, David. How are you?
Pretty good. First night with good sleep in a long time.
Oh, wonderful.
Chipper.
So glad to hear it. We're on chapter 26, verse 20, and we were talking both about the image in the Torah of trying to grow food and the elements not cooperating in that process, but also beyond that, the image of trying to accomplish any goal, working hard at it, and having the frustration of all of our energy not yielding the desired result, and how incredibly frustrating that can be. I think second only to that for me is reduplication of effort. It's hard when you're trying to do something and you can't get it done, and then the worst thing is when you work hard at it and then you have to do it again. Anybody ever write a whole document and then forget to save it and
Oh, yeah.
and you lose the link and you have to redo what you just did? It's the worst.
When I was working for the state, I was doing some special projects, and they said, after doing all the work, they said, well, we don't need your project.
Yeah.
Oh,
Started it.
that's awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
an awful feeling for sure.
Yes, Dan. When I was in the Army one time, my group commander was invited to be the guest speaker at a prayer breakfast. So of course, what does he know from a speech at a prayer breakfast? So he asked me to write a speech for him, which I did, wrote a beautiful speech, and then for whatever reason, he ended up not going to the event. It's like,
Well, you saved your speech for another time.
yeah, I don't think I've ever used that one. Actually, I have in my drawer in the desk at the temple one time. So are you all familiar with, there's a website called BeliefNet? I'm sure I've mentioned it before, BeliefNet. So
BeliefNet.
BeliefNet there's a test on BeliefNet that is 20 multiple choice questions. And it asks you about your beliefs about God and the afterlife and, you know, certain medical issues from a faith-based context. And you answer these 20 questions and it will tell you, it will match you up with a religion.
Okay.
You know what religion your beliefs reflect. So I had developed this massive teaching one time based on the thesis of let's look at this BeliefNet test and see, what do you have to answer? What's the Jewish answer to each of these questions?
There you go.
If you want to test it. And then I think Shavuot, I was going to do it one Shavuot. It was running late. I didn't get to do it. So that is still sitting in the drawer to pull out. But if you've
I
never
think
done
that
that,
sounds like fun.
I'm going to write that down for you. Maybe that would be good homework for everybody for next week. Come back and tell us what your actual religion is.
Right. What we turn out.
Here's what-
And Reform Judaism and Orthodox Judaism are separate choices. So you can test into Reform Judaism or into Orthodox Judaism or into, I think in my top 2 or 3 was Sikh.
Uh-huh.
Ah,
Am I to assume that if when you finish the test, Satan appears in your living room, you failed?
What's that? Satan? No, I
Appears in your living room, you failed.
no, I bet there is some satanic option.
Was that
Anyway.
belief.net?
BeliefNet.
Belief.
BeliefNet.
I'll send you the link. I put it on my list to send.
Great.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
sounds like fun.
It'd be fun. Yeah, it's a fun activity, and it's multiple choice, so you can't go wrong. Good. So moving on then to verse 21. Ve'im telchu imi keri. So if you walk with me, keri. So this word keri is a hapax legomenon. That's a word that occurs only in this location in the Torah. So we don't really know what it means. I have a translation here that says contrary. I have a translation that says hostile. Anybody have the Eitz Chaim commentary there?
Yeah,
Who is that?
your mother.
Oh, my mother. Hello, Mom. Can you read on the bottom of page 749? You see where it says hostile?
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, could you read that? And I think it goes on the next page. Yeah.
A word found nowhere else in the Bible characterizing the Israelite attitude of disobedience. It has prompted several interpretations. Hoffman takes it to mean at cross purposes, doing the opposite of what God commands, in the way the adolescent will often do the opposite of what they are told to proclaim their autonomy. Rashi and Ibn Ezra relate to the word perchance, following God's ways only when convenient, only if it happens to work out favorably, rather than out of a sense of obligation or love. Salanta relates it to kor, cold, so that it would mean calculated without passion. These curses will not only if the people Israel violate God's law, but even if they obey.
Mom, Sandy, stop.
Yes.
Start again with these curses.
These curses will occur not only if the people Israel violate God's law, but even if they obey them in the spirit that drains them of religious value.
ooh.
If the people Israel follow the commands without love, in a calculating manner, God says, I will act towards you coldly, the carrot, without the love that makes forgiveness or misbehavior possible.
So a few different interpretations of this word, since we have no other context to compare it to.
And in stone, it's translated as casually.
Casual.
Do it casually.
There's this one here that I am reading. It says, If you remain hostile towards me and refuse to obey me, I will go on smiting you sevenfold for your sins. I will lose wild beasts against you, and they shall bereave you of your children and wipe out your cattle. They shall decimate you, and your roads shall be deserted.
Wow.
Right, so that's, you went all the way to through verse 22.
Yeah,
It's the same
right in there. Yeah.
interpretation.
Hostile. Robin, what have you got?
My interpretation, it's the art scroll one,
Uh-huh.
and it says with indifference, which I think that's very powerful, because I remember always learning that, you know, love is actually with emotion, hate is with emotion, but indifference is really cold and cruel, and or just not caring. But yeah, do you want me to read what it says about?
Sure.
Okay. With indifference, claiming that the events are just chance occurrences. The translation follows Ibn Ezra, Rabbam, and Rabbi Bachye, who see the world as related to happenstance, meaning that the people will refuse to recognize that their misfortunes were divinely ordained, and that if carefully and objectively analyzed, the punishments could be seen to fit the crime, and therefore they are a clear message to repent. Instead, they will insist that everything was a coincidence and the result of natural causes.
So yes, Barry Kipnis.
Friedman I think, uses a little stronger word. Friedman uses defiance. It's not, which I think is much stronger than indifference, because defiance is,
oh yes,
you just don't, you're doing it, but you really don't like what you're doing. And you're doing it for some reason, out of fear, out of awe, whatever, but you're not indifferent to it. You just don't like it.
Goodbye.
Oh.
yes. So I think that was the Hoffman translation interpretation. At cross purposes is defiant, like really with a sense of spitefulness. So that's a lot more passion involved there than
indifference.
Right. So we have at cross purposes, which is in Hebrew, there's a term dafka, just, but David, I see you shaking your head. How would you translate or explain dafka?
Just so.
What's that?
Just so.
Just so, just because, like just to be defiant. So dafka, you tell me put the cup down here, I put it down there, dafka. Mm-hmm. And this business of coldly, with dispassionately, indifferently. What's interesting about that is that it's not often at all that we see commandments that relate to emotion. Typically, the text, the mitzvot, are much more concerned with what we do than with how we feel about what we do. So when we look at tzedakah, for example, the mitzvah is to give tzedakah. It's better if you do it with a good and full heart, but you have fulfilled the mitzvah even if you do it dispassionately in the way that we're describing here. But here, this is a general statement. If we don't listen, if we don't care, we have the opportunity, according to these commentaries, to act with love. So what were the options? We could fulfill the mitzvot out of obligation. It's a mitzvah, it's a commandment. We are obligated to fulfill the mitzvot, and so we do them. Or we can fulfill them out of love. We love God. God asks us to do this. When people we love ask us to do something, we do it. So we're acting from a place of love.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is that actually the proper? I will go on smiting you sevenfold.
Right. So
what's the purpose or meaning of sevenfold? Is that some special? Why not tenfold? Why not fivefold? Why sevenfold?
Well, 7 is a recurring biblical theme number. 7, I think I'm imagining hearkening back to 7 days of creation, you know, that the number 7 is just built into the cycles of nature. We just finished a whole study, right, about the sabbatical year.
Right. So that's why that's kind of built into it.
Yeah. So I think it's, I don't know that it's meant to be taken literally. I think it's just one of those recurring biblical theme numbers. Robin, yeah?
In my commentary, it says it refers to 7 punishments. So maybe that's the 7, because it says the 7 punishments of this series are, and then lists wild beasts, domestic animals, poisonous snakes, death of children, loss of livestock, diminution of population, and desolation of roads.
So referring to 7 punishments that are coming up.
Yeah, maybe
7 specific punishments. Yeah, Lisa?
So, you know, all these curses put me in mind a little bit of the book of Revelation at the end of the New Testament. And there, the Lamb of God is depicted with 7 horns and 7 eyes, and the 7 spirits that God sends out into the world. So even that 7 echoes forward so much. Such a biblical number just echoes forward all the time.
Yeah. It's hard for us. Go ahead.
This is Becca. Yeah. It occurs to me that looking back at the verses, looking ahead at some of the verses, when we were talking about verse 20, and it says, and I've got the Friedman here, and your power will be used up in vain. It seems that all of this is also a very strong reminder that you are, your power is a gift from God. You are not independently powerful. And so even if you think that if you work hard enough, that you will still be able to control your animals, control the land, you know, build your roads that won't be, it seems to be subtly put in there with verse 20 about the power, that you are not independently capable. And Friedman uses the word defiance for the word that's been up for discussion. And looking ahead, that word's going to show up a few more times. And in the context that's coming up, the defiance seems to be, God saying, let me just remind you about all the things that you think that you're doing so well. You wouldn't do any of those if you didn't have me. And so that sort of seems like an overarching theme.
Right, and if you look back in verse 18, you'll see that we saw sevenfold just a couple of verses ago.
Yeah.
So it's clearly a recurring theme.
Oh,
And you're right, Becca. So, you know, when the Israelites are about to enter the land, this is the prediction. You're going to get there and you're going to get settled and you're going to say, my own strength and power built all this, and you're going to forget God and you're going to be punished for that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it sort of reminds me of, you know, the controversy when President Obama said, you know, you didn't build that. Right. You know, the idea that we were a community, we lived together, you know, nobody has the power and the glory alone. No man is an island in our cultural civilization. So there's that sense of connection, of thinking that it's, you know, it's all you and all your.
By remembering back just the prior lines, it's almost as if God is saying, this land and your existence is going to be so bad that you actually will just want to abandon everything and just leave.
Rabbi,
the frustration element is enormous. Yeah, Barry Kipnis.
in essence, we're being told that we have absolutely no control over our destiny. That and it's just enumerating all the various areas that we have absolutely no control over.
Right.
Because our power will be used up in vain, no matter how hard we try.
Right.
What we do without God's sufferance or God's aid. it's not going to happen.
Right. That's a good summary. Good. So Sarah Lee already read the second half of the verse for us. So if you remain hostile, if you refuse to obey, you'll be punished sevenfold. And then according to Robin's interpretation, we then get, I didn't read it as 7 specific curses, but let's see what they are, starting in verse 22. First of all, wild beasts that will bereave you of your children and wipe out your cattle. So we've talked about this wild beast thing before, how protecting ourselves from wild beasts is not, it's not a concern that we share for the most part. I mean, some of us may have coyotes or javelina that plague our households, but for the most part, we're, you know, we hear of the occasional mountain lion that, or even bear that comes into communities, but they're such exceptional phenomena that they make the news. It's a big deal when something like that happens to us now. But in the ancient world, you know, civilization was much more fragile, much more tenuous. You know, you lived on the edge of town, and keeping those wild beasts at bay was a real everyday concern. Yeah, Terry?
It occurs to me that we tend to go back and forth when reading text, and this came up strongly, I think, last week with Bobby. The literal and the metaphorical, because the wild beasts in their literal form may not be a great danger to us, but there are lots of wild beasts out there in metaphorical terms.
Absolutely. So one of the ways we understand that we've talked about is our own Yetzer Hara, is the wild beast within us, and I guess by extension you could say the Yetzer Hara in others, and we still do all suffer from the unleashing of the Yetzer Hara in our communities. And they do bereave us of our children.
I think you could qualify some of these shootings that we've been seeing, these police murders, as wild beasts that accomplish this purpose. I mean, there is a wild, you're right, there's a Vilda Chaya in all of us.
Right. Yes, Lisa.
Maybe we could, sometimes I think of COVID-19 as a wild beast.
Mm-hmm.
Wild beast, you know, the wild beast doesn't have to be big with big claws.
Right.
It could be very small.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I keep meaning, Helena keeps asking me, you know, what does the virus look like? I keep,
it's invisible to us. That's the invisibility.
Yeah, I keep meaning to look it up on the internet and show it to her.
It has a little corona, you know, it has rays emanating from.
Like Star Trek and the invisible attacks from these monsters in the outer, you know, that come in you can't see.
More wild beasts.
Yeah.
More wild beasts, right?
Yeah. David, yeah.
You also have to realize that the people coming out of Egypt are a completely different mindset. If they're pastoral and they raise sheep and goats, the land, if anybody's been to Egypt, is basically more or less a flat, limited to the river and oases. However, going into the land of Canaan, you have hill country that has some beautiful pasture lands, but it has much more space for the wild boar, the lions, for predators to hide in and among the mountain country. So to me, it reads, if you don't work together as a group, this is what's going to happen. Because you can Today, the wild boars all through Haifa at Kibbutz Yagur. If you work as a group, you can keep them under control. If you don't work as a group, this is the results. And I think that's also in Micah, Jeremiah, and Joshua, talking about what happens if you don't work together as a group. And the root words for the, oh God, I can't remember how to say it again. Does that have anything to do with the same root words for Makir Berachim, or the first fruits offering?
Bikurim.
Bikurim. The root of the word that we were talking about.
Kerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that we know the etymology of Kerry because
Because it's very close to Makir Bakurim,
yeah.
The first, the offerings.
Yeah. So we had it related to Mikra, we had it related to Kar. So
I'm just looking at the first three.
I have my lexicon here. Let me grab it.
Sorry about that, everybody. Just there's a
I
place.
have my handy dandy BDB Brown Driver Bricks. So let's look up what they say about Kerry.
It's an interesting word.
Yep.
I mean, I'm even going Latin here, or whatever, carrion in English. But
I was thinking of that.
There's something in that root that may have carried over into other language groups.
Okay, so it's relating anything from Kar to Kuf Resh Resh. So let's go to Kuf Resh Resh.
Does everybody know why we're going at this direction?
Because we digress.
Hebrew letters have a 3-letter key.
Oh.
Yes.
Source can get you to some of the other translations and meanings.
Yeah, so karar, kuf resh resh, is to be cold, but it's not listing our word kerry as from that root. Kerry. No. Yeah, I'm really not finding anything, David. So
More research to follow.
Kerry. Oh, so here, Kari. Well, it's not quite. It's the same letters, not the same vowels. From Kuf Resh Hey. So let's see what we have for Kuf Resh Hey. Kuf Resh Hey. So that would be the mikra, the encounter, meet, befall.
Mikret ha bakarim. The first offerings of the fruit in the fall. Would that be?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Bikurim, I'm familiar with. I'm not sure what word you're putting before mikra. Bikurim.
Yes.
So yeah, mikra is an accident or chance or a fortune. Mikra is definitely from this same root as to encounter. So yeah, I mean, there could be mikra and kerry. Yes, they look like they both come from Kuf Resh Hey, according to Brown Driver Briggs.
Okay.
So do you have this book, David?
No, I don't. But the reason that popped up in my head was I remembered an article published by the Biblical Heritage Group out of Neot. Oh. They specialize in growing plants and raising plants of Israel of the biblical time period near Jerusalem. And I remember a lecturer was saying, this guy was saying, from the first offerings, the people who were coming out of Egypt had it differently because the way the food was available had to be raised, because this whole thing is, we're talking about agriculture, and the agriculture style of the land of Israel is very different from the agricultural style of the land of Egypt. And so that lecture was showing the differences between what they were and what they were going to become and what they are, both in on the land, how to receive the vegetables, the gardens, the honey. Everything was going to be completely different.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, that they need to have warnings that are specific to the terrain they're about to enter, given that it's so different from what they are accustomed to. So, so I wrote down the page number, and if and when I ever get to the temple, I'll copy and scan those couple of pages so you can see it a little bit more in depth.
Thank you.
Or I don't know if that's available online. I'll look afterwards and see if I can find it online as well. So wild beasts bereave you of your children and wipe out your cattle. I appreciate the fact that children is mentioned first. We can't always take for granted in these lists of punishments that the order in which the punishment is threatened will be the same as the same valuation that we might put to it. I'm thinking about the 10 Commandments, and let me just find that. Oh, yeah, so I'm thinking about, by contrast, in Exodus 20:14, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You know, I would have liked it better if wife was more of a priority than house. So at least here the kids made it ahead of the cattle. But you know, your cattle, again, to Terry's point of the metaphor, the cattle obviously is your wealth. You'll lose everything. You'll lose everything that you have. They shall decimate you, and your roads shall be deserted. So that's so interesting. You know, we're experiencing now our roads getting more frequented. Remember how the first couple of weeks of the quarantine, how eerie it was to have the roads be empty? So so that's kind of the threat here. The commerce will grind to a halt. When we think about busy roads, we think about commerce, and we think about community and people traveling to be together with each other. So when the roads are deserted, it's a very frightening image, that a sense of loneliness and being bereft. I think just we crave community. We want to be together with people, and when the roads are deserted, it means we're alone. And that's been one of the challenges of this quarantine period for people who live alone and truly have been alone. I think they can appreciate this metaphor even more so, the idea of just everything grinding to a halt and the sense of isolation. The roads will be deserted. So, and if these things fail to
this favorite, yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay, Terry. So
this is the tooth. This is the tooth. This is the tooth in your story.
Oh, okay. Can you read us 23 to 26 kind of go together? So read us the next little group here.
And if these things fail to discipline you for me.
I still didn't get your attention, right?
Yes. And you remain hostile to me, I too will remain hostile to you. I in turn will smite you sevenfold again for your sins. I will bring a sword against you to wreak vengeance for the covenant. And if you withdraw into your cities, I will send pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into enemy hands. When I break your staff of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in a single oven. They shall dole out your bread by weight, and though you eat, you shall not be satisfied.
Wow.
My commentary down here says that breaking your staff of bread is comparing the walking staff to the staff of life.
Mm. Yeah, that is an unusual image, your staff of bread.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. I'm thinking of like a paddle for a pizza oven, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, you're close, because in a single oven, they said, refers to because fuel is in short supply, and dole you out your bread by weight implies rationing.
Right.
And there would be very little, limited everything.
And
Right.
here it says that that's the threat of a famine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be so little food that everybody won't need their own oven.
Oh.
Right.
Hence, that's why the 7 women are baking in the same oven?
Exactly.
10 women.
Got it.
10 women, yes.
Why not 7? 10.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yes, Marcy?
Yeah, my commentary says many women will share one oven, whether for lack of dough or for lack of wood to fuel the oven.
Right.
Either way, the threat is that of famine. Variations on this theme are common in ancient Near Eastern culture curses.
Right. And again, that lack of satisfaction in eating, we've seen that before as a threat in other contexts. Even when you do get to eat something, it won't be satisfying to you, which is also a terrible curse to eat and
But
this gives an example of a couple of more curses, since we were talking about them earlier. A curse in the Aramaic sapphire inscription reads, "And may his 7 daughters bake bread in an oven but not fill it." And a curse in the bilingual Assyrian Aramaic, I can't pronounce the next word, reads, "May 100 women bake bread in an oven and not fill it." So those are other curses from the times.
So a common theme.
It seems like I'm sorry. This is Becca. It seems like what's being threatened is you will be threatened externally and you will be threatened internally. You will have an enemy. The enemies will gather about you, and you will have an epidemic, which is external that becomes internal, and then ultimately internally, even if you eat, you won't be full. So there's nothing, you are unprotected in every possible way.
Right, even if you withdraw into your cities, so you're close together and you're coming together, you still won't be safe.
Right.
But it's sequential, right? Like it doesn't happen all at once. It's like first the beasts, and then if you withdraw, then the other stuff happens. So
Yeah.
It's not all at once, right?
You'll be delivered into enemy hands. So Lisa, you had a comment.
Oh, yeah. So, again, this image of famine is so intense. Again, that image moves forward in the book of Revelation about the end of the world. One of the four riders of the apocalypse is famine. And it says a ration of wheat will cost a day's pay, and 3 rations of barley cost a day's pay. So it's going to, we see famine, and it's going to cost us everything just to eat a little, just to have the very bare minimum.
In our own little way, we've experienced a little bit of scarcity of resources. We're used to living lives of such abundance and of availability. And I remember, maybe 3 months ago already, being in the grocery store and checking out, and the cashier said to me, "Oh, you found tomatoes." I had a couple of cans of tomatoes. Like, wow, you found, things that we are accustomed to taking for granted, that availability. And I mean, there's still rationing going on. You want to buy bleach or whatever it is at the store, not one per customer. Right. That's a new experience for all of us. We're used to being spoiled brats and having as much of whatever we want whenever we want it.
Yeah.
Even with paper goods, they're still rationing. Even though I noticed the other day at Bash's, they had totally full shelves of toilet paper, Kleenex, and paper towels. and it still only says 1 per customer.
Uh-huh.
That's good.
Mom?
Yeah. Oh, I don't have a problem with
If you're
it.
as old as I am,
What's that?
you can remember rationing. We had ration booklets
Yeah.
during the war. I don't know if anyone here would remember that. But you had a ration book and you could only get so much meat and so much sugar, and that was it. You had to live with what you could get.
Yeah, I
It
remember
was way
my
before
mother
your
talking-
time.
I remember my mother talking about it when I was a child, and my brother you used meat ration coupons for shoes. And my brother was always wearing out shoes, so my grandmother would send meat ration coupons to my mother so that my brother could have shoes.
Oh, we saw that a little bit in the contemporary world when, Rabbi, when we were in Cuba and we saw, people had their ration books and the little stores would say, today we have salt or sugar or whatever, and you can use your ration coupon for your salt or sugar this month or whatever.
Yeah, you're right, Lisa. I remember looking at those government stores with, the shelves pathetically empty and, maybe a couple of little packages of some beans or whatever. So you'll withdraw to your cities. Pestilence, you shall be delivered into enemy hands. I think that's kind of interesting because it's this idea of God's intervention in history and that other nations are used by God to punish and reward the Israelites. So it's very much this image of God being very actively involved in history. If we are vanquished by our enemies, it's way beyond politics. That is God using our enemy for God's own purposes, which sort of begs the question then of like Pharaoh's heart being hardened. Can those people be held responsible for their behavior if they are purely instruments of God punishing the Israelites? But it's a very egocentric view of history that's being promulgated here. It's all whatever happens is about primarily God's relationship with the Israelites and with the Jewish people, and everything that's happening around us is in response to our behavior. It's again, I don't know that we can take that literally, and yet we still do see even today the intensity of the focus on what goes on in Israel compared to the rest of the world. My mom can speak to how much of the energy of the United Nations is taken up with responding to incidents in this teeny tiny little country where things that go on in other places in the world don't even make it onto the radar screen. I'm hoping that you have available, I had photocopied and sent to Robin a commentary from the Women's Torah commentary on this verse about the baking of the bread. It's on page 770. Were people able to find that?
That was what I just read from.
Me too.
Uh-huh. Oh, the Aramaic, I got to not say that either. SEFIRE. Yeah. Okay, so good. So Marcy, would you continue then?
Sure, where was I?
May 100 women bake bread in an oven and not kill it.
Okay.
So I wanted to read that whole section there.
Sure. I'll do the best I can.
Yeah, it appears that ovens.
It appears that ovens were beehive-shaped forms made of a mixture of chopped clay and straw, sometimes with broken shards pressed onto the oven. They could be slightly recessed into the ground. See P. King and L. Steger, Life in Biblical Israel. I guess that's another book.
Right.
They were generally in the courtyard and probably served several adjacent dwellings. But they could also be in interior space. A baker would more likely fire up an interior oven in cold, rainy weather. The bread could be baked on a baking tray set over the fire inside the oven. And that whole last bit was from the editor. Oven fuel consisted of branches or dung. Here the text specifies women as the ones who bake the bread. This provides some insight into the division of labor in the ancient Israelite household. While women were the ones responsible for childbearing and child rearing, they also divided with men the other duties necessary to sustain and support the household. This text then provides evidence that women were predominantly responsible for tasks related to food production, that is, the transformation of raw foodstuffs into consumable goods. In the ancient world, this was a very important and time-consuming task. Other biblical texts, other biblical texts, through their association of women and food production in various forms, support this conclusion. For example, in 1 Samuel 28, verse 24, the medium of Endor prepares a calf and makes bread for King Saul. In Jeremiah 7, verses 17 to 18, women are described as kneading dough for cakes to offer to the Queen of Heaven. In 1 Samuel 8, verse 13, the prophet Samuel warns the people that monarchy will make many demands of them, including that the king, quote, will take your daughters as perfumers, cooks, and bakers, end quote. This last text implies that women indeed served those functions at the royal palace, as well as in ordinary households. See further at Exodus 16:3.
There you go. So I just thought that was an interesting discussion about the role of women in sustaining the household in ancient Israel. And if you have not already found that commentary in the documents that Robin put up on our URL, please find it, because we're going to also look at the commentaries on verses 29 and 30. So baking, so there's a famine. People are trying to bake. I think we've seen a lot of that lately as well. As all kinds of people who never were bakers have taken up baking. There's the big sourdough frenzy a month or so ago. Everybody was trying to get, yeah, Terry, making sourdough bread?
Absolutely.
Where'd you get your starter from?
I have made it for years. I had a starter going for about a year and a half. A good one. I have a really good starter.
That's so funny. I wouldn't know what makes a good starter.
It's very alive. I can leave it sit in the back of the refrigerator for 2 months and shake it up and give it a feeding, and it springs to life.
Wow.
But you have to feed it. It's like Seymour. You have to feed
Mary,
it.
how does one feed a sourdough starter?
Very carefully.
You dump out a little bit, and then you put in about a quarter or half a cup of flour and the same amount of water, and you stir it up, and it goes,
yeah,
and then it comes. So when you're ready to bake, you want to get it on the upswing of its feeding time, and not the down. It's complicated.
Nice. So Robin just put up in our chat the link for all of the supplementary texts. So if you haven't found them, thank you, Robin. We really appreciate your taking custody and responsibility for that. So I think that's a good stopping point, because verse 27 is like, and if you still don't get it.
I just love this.
Yeah. The curses escalate, and now we're going to get into the famine being so bad that
it's like torture, where they're pulling out one tooth. Tell me now, 2 teeth. Are you still going? How about your knees? How about whatever?
That's what it is. It's
Hoffman and Marathon Man. Is it safe yet?
Yeah,
right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Feel like a nail and a hammer hitting you.
Yeah.
Dragging it further and further down.
All right, that hurts.
Well, so it goes on really until the end of the chapter.
It sounds like God doesn't have much faith in us at all.
Yeah, well, right. Well, somebody doesn't have faith, Sarah Lee, you know, we started off when we were talking about the understanding of Kerry and hostility. And we said, you know, if you don't obey the mitzvot out of obligation or love. So whether it's out of obligation or out of love, you're absolutely right. There's not a lot of confidence expressed here that either of those are going to motivate us. So we're going to have to be motivated by fear. And
it's the rod, not the carrot.
Well,
yes,
he gave us a carrot, and now he's threatening us what will happen if we.
right. You think back to the beginning of the chapter. We started off with blessings. Like let's remember, we did start with blessings, and it was only after, you know, if the blessings don't motivate you. And of course, I think there are at least 3, if not 4 times as many curses as there were blessings. So I think it's speaking to human nature, unfortunately.
And not learning from modern.
With that, everybody have a good week. Again, wise aging on Wednesday, socialize while distancing on Thursday. We have our bereavement group on Monday. So lots of opportunities to see everybody's beautiful faces between now and next Sunday. If you need any of those links, just let me know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
You all take care. Have a good
Amen. Amen. Stop recording and I will send you this link.